We are so excited. This is our second in HeartLife's new E3 webinar series, Engage, Educate, and Empower. We're going to be hosting these throughout the year as we go. The first one was on inflammation, this one on mental health, each designed to really highlight topics that matter to our community, what we hear from you. I am so grateful and proud to introduce our moderator, Anne-Marie, who's been leading the charge for us on this. Anne-Marie is a patient partner, peer support leader, a communicator who is passionate about improving patient experiences and outcomes by translating knowledge into meaningful tools, resources, dialogue, and support. Since 2015, she's worked closely with the University of Ottawa Heart Institute as an active patient partner, co-creating patient-facing resources, advising on engagement strategies, and helping to integrate lived experience into care and research. She also hosts the Ticker Talk podcast for the Cardiovascular Network of Canada and has moderated many in-person sessions and online webinars for the University of Ottawa Heart Institute and the patient partner community. Anne-Marie is excited to bring her experience and passion to HeartLife Space as part of our E3 series. Anne-Marie, I'm going to hand it to you and sign off.
Thanks so much, Mark. Welcome, everyone. Looks like we have folks joining us from across Canada, and it's exciting to be here today and to have these two very special guests with us. We're very fortunate to have with us today Jordan Danger. Jordan is an award-winning visual artist working in sculpture, paint, and clay. And before becoming a full-time artist, she worked in social work with the LGBTQ plus youth and later built a second career in marketing. She's going to talk a bit about her cardiac journey today, which started in 2018. Through her experiences as a patient, she became deeply committed to sharing knowledge and fostering dialogue around heart health. She's passionate about patient empowerment, believes education is the key to better outcomes, and she brings the same empathy and creativity to advocacy that she brings to her art. So Jordan is going to start us off today with sharing her story. And then after Jordan speaks, we'll hear from Dr. Samuel Sears. Dr. Sears is a professor in the departments of psychology and cardiovascular sciences at East Carolina University. He serves as the division chief of innovation and research at the East Carolina Heart Institute. His work is reflected in his over 200 articles that have been published in the medicine and psychology research literatures, and his recognition has been reflected in 2025. Dr. Sears was recognized as a world expert on defibrillators. So he's very comfortable in this heart space. He continues to practice and teach health psychology and cardiology clinics at the East Carolina Heart Institute and East Carolina University. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jordan, and then we're going to hear from Dr. Sears, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. You can enter your questions at any time in the question and answer space. And just a note that because this is a public forum and because we are going to be recording and posting online, that we don't dive into very specific personal situations. That's really a conversation better had with your healthcare team. So with that, over to you, Jordan.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Just before I click on my slides here, hello, my name is Jordan. I'm so excited to be talking with you. And I'm going to open my slides now for you. There we go. Okay. So meet Jordan. So you heard a little intro about me. I'm just going to kind of give you some context for my heart journey by telling you a bit about myself when it began. So in 2018, if we look back at Jordan, I've been a lifelong artist. I've been a practicing artist for now about 20 years. At this point, though, in 2018, I had 10 years in social work, and I had shifted into marketing, where I was doing really well. I had won a 40 Under 40 award for my work with small and medium enterprise and startups. I was teaching at the college level part-time in marketing, and I was leading a marketing team that was at a growing startup with demanding needs. We had gone from, I think, 25 staff to 100 in the first year I was with them, and growing all the time. And we'd gone from Series A to B funding. And on top of that, I had already done 6,000 hours of volunteer time and raised many tens of thousands of dollars of funds for causes of my choice. So very driven, busy, A-type, very very organized, academic, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of my style. And along the way here in the presentation, I've included some examples of my art that are in time, like they line up with the parts of the story to kind of show you a little bit about me from another aspect. And that is when my heart journey began. So in 2018, I started having a lot of fatigue, palpitations, pre-syncope, which is like pre-fainting feelings. I went to the doctor and I had a Holter done, but they didn't find anything. So I was told I was too stressed. And the doctor I was seeing at the time said, you should quit your day job because you should just stay home. Your husband makes good money. Like, well, just don't have a job. Obviously, you can't handle it. I thought that was ridiculous because I obviously had a lot of success and I had been managing very well up until this point. But it was really hard to not believe that, and I ended up thinking, okay, maybe that they were right. And the most concerning part was I was so sure that I must be crazy or that I must be wrong, that at one point my condition, which was as yet undiagnosed, I had an episode at the top of a flight of stairs and I fell down the stairs and I ended up we had to call a paramedic. Everybody thought my hip was broken. And while the EMTs were there, they hooked me up to the EKG system, which I always do right away. And they were like, man, your heart is doing something very strange. And I actually yelled at them and I said, no, we've already looked at it. It's nothing. You're focused on the wrong thing. My hip is hurting. And so they dropped it. And I think it's because they assumed that I didn't know the language for what was wrong for me, but like that I must know. So they were like, okay, well, she must know what this is. Looking back, I definitely didn't know. And it's just kind of a weird thing to look back at for me to go, wow, I believed so much that I must have been crazy. It must be this just anxiety, that even when someone had me hooked to a monitor, I was still telling them they were wrong and that there was nothing wrong with me. In 2019, I surrendered to the advice of my doctor and I gave up my job. I began a 2-hour-a-day meditation practice. I switched to a freelance practice as a marketer so that I could work part-time. I tried seeing acupuncture, osteopath, chiropractor, RMT, counselor. I'm probably missing some, trying to resolve stress. And I had to give up my art because I had no energy to make anything, and so many palpitations that were making me feel pre-syncope that I couldn't stay at my workbench anymore. So this is one of the last things I made. In darker times, 2021, I got an Apple Watch. So I basically from 2019 to 2021, I just cut back everything I could in life, and I was still feeling terrible. I was still having all the same symptoms. In 21, I got an Apple Watch for Christmas, and it catches AFib. My family doctor says, a different family doctor says, that's impossible. You're too young. This is a mistake of the watch. There's no way this is a real thing. However, the reason why I first looked at my watch was there was a day where we were headed out to a family cottage and I was sitting in the car driving along with my husband, nothing crazy going on at all. I'm not even driving. And I said, I think I'm feeling one of those feelings now. And my husband said, well, look at your watch. And I didn't know how to do the AFib button yet, the AFib tracker thing. But I did know how to look at my heart rate, and it was at 165, and I'm just sitting in the car doing nothing. And so we rushed to the hospital, but by the time I got there, I had converted, which I didn't know about yet, but now I know what that is all about. So I had paroxysmal AFib, which means it comes and goes. And for those who maybe don't know, AFib is an arrhythmia. Anyway, so we started this wonderful game of going back and forth, trying to get to the hospital when I wasn't feeling well. And it just kept going away before I'd get onto an ECG or whatever. My watch kept catching things, but the doctor kept saying that didn't matter. We did some more Holters, they didn't catch it either. So finally, we had this one bad night where it wasn't stopping. And I thought, I'm not going to move. I'm just going to sit here and wait, and we're going to call an ambulance. And the ambulance came, They hooked me up, and right away they were like, "You're an AFib." Um, and I just started to cry because I was like, I knew something was really wrong. And they were emotional with me, and they ended up just printing out all of these tracings, and they were like, "Give this one to your family doctor, give this one to the gynecologist, give this." So I had their support, and that was really great. But it was very emotional to be validated, and I ended up just crying a whole bunch. Um, my heart care journey. So essentially, at that point, I was referred to the Heart Institute in Ottawa, the Ottawa University of Ottawa Heart Institute, and began a wait that took quite a long time. And this was a very challenging time for me because this was in pretty early days of COVID. So you weren't allowed to bring anyone to the hospital with you. And I had been told, okay, you're going to get surgery, but there's a wait for it. And it could be anywhere between 1 and 3 years. And in the meantime, if you have AFib for 12 hours or longer, you could throw a clot. So we're going to put you on blood thinners. And if you do have it for 4 hours, if you have it for 4 hours, go to the hospital at 4 hours, because the wait is so long at the ER that it'll be 12 hours before they see you anyway. So I am a person who has symptomatic AFib. Some people don't have symptoms. And so when it would begin, we would start the countdown. And then we would figure out a way to get me to the hospital. Sometimes that was an ambulance, depending on how high my heart rate was and how frightened we were. And sometimes it was my husband driving me at 2 a.m. or whatever. And then I would go to the hospital by myself and go through all of the tests for a heart attack. They always do all the same tests, and then wait. And inevitably, I would convert naturally. I would go back to heart sinus rhythm naturally before they had to do anything. One time, they literally were getting the paddles ready, and I think it just scared me so badly that I went back into normal rhythm. So I probably went to the hospital in the last year leading up to the surgery. I probably went to the hospital 2 or 3 times a month, just trying to make sure that nothing bad happened. So that was a really frightening time for me, and far outside of my comfort zone, things that I was familiar with. I had never gone to the hospital by myself before for any reason ever. And now I had a go bag with snacks and masks and sanitizer and earbuds and a power bank for my phone. And there were times where I was sitting in the ER and it would be messy, and I would just start cleaning up people's leftover robes and whatever they'd left in the waiting room, because it was just such a situation there during COVID. So in 2023, I had my first cardiac ablation. And when they did that, they found I had AFib and A flutter, so atrial flutter. The recovery was really slow for me. And this was a tricky time too, because again, I had doctors saying, "Oh, this is such an easy surgery. You're going to feel great right away." And I didn't feel great right away. And I was probably 4, maybe even 6 months later, still having trouble just getting up a flight of stairs. At the top, I would be panting like I'd run a marathon. And luckily, I had a call with a nurse who was doing a routine follow-up. And I said, I don't know. I just think I could be better than this, but I can't exercise. I can't get going. And she said, ask about rehab. So I'm so glad that she did that, because once I asked for it, it was a very easy referral, and rehab changed my whole recovery path. It was also a big deal for me because at the time we were living in the country. So every time that ambulance had to come, they had to come into the country and then go across the craziest goat path road to take me back to town. And so when we were doing rehab, and like after they tell you to go for walks, walking is a big part of cardiac recovery. But where I lived was in the middle of nowhere. There's 4 houses on my road, and my road is a kilometer if you do a loop, and there's no other streets. It's just a loop. And so I was too afraid to go for walks because my husband worked during the day, and at night it was too dark. And if I went by myself, I was worried that someone was just going to find me half eaten by coyotes one day. So rehab really helped me because it gave me a place to exercise that was safe. And then I was able to start doing things like, I set up a regular bike. I got an e-bike so that I could switch modes if I felt like I needed to get home quickly. And I sort of find my path that way too. But it was a lot of trial and error. I ended up having more symptoms, and we ended up doing a second ablation and adding a loop recorder, which is, I have a little thing inside of me that tracks my heart rhythm. And yeah, and that basically I had to have those two surgeries, and I may be up for a third one possibly because in the end, I ended up having three arrhythmias. We've fixed two, knock on wood, but the third is still active, just not active enough to have fixed the first two times. To be honest, I'm not that stressed about the ablations anymore. Well, the first time going in, I was terrified, and my understanding of what we're doing now is so much greater. Just touching on the emotional aspect of this, it was so life-changing to have people take me seriously. I had an amazing team. The Heart Institute is known for being amazing, but I didn't realize how great they were going to be and making me feel listened to, and my concerns affirmed. My questions about my future were always listened to, which was great, with my surgical team and or my EP team. And so the picture here are mugs, and these are the first thing I was able to make after rehab. And I made mugs for my entire surgical team, or my rehab team, my rehab team and my EP team. So I made these mugs, and they're pretty wonky, but they were the first thing I was able to stand at a table long enough to make. So hopefully the sentimentality makes up for the wonky cups. And after that, I still found myself breaking down and starting to get choked up when I would enter the Heart Institute for follow-ups or any sort of reason to be there, even if I was feeling completely fine. I just found it just took me back to the fears that I had lived with and so often had to go through by myself during my surgeries and all the stuff leading up to them. And as well, I had a lot of patient burnout. So at one point between my first and my second ablation, I actually avoided follow-up for about 6 months because I knew that something was up again. And I was so afraid that they were going to tell me, don't worry about it, or that's not enough for us to do anything about, or it's in your head, or it's just PVCs and we can't fix that, or whatever. And so I could not handle the idea of being dismissed again. And I actually avoided follow-up for about 6 months. And then when I finally did the follow-up, it went way better than I thought it would. But I'll be honest with you, I've dealt with a lot of medical issues in my time, and it's not always going to be smooth. I know that. I'm not always going to get listened to, and I sometimes have to do a lot of advocacy, and it can get really exhausting. And I think that's why we see patients who don't follow up or don't come back. I think that happens quite a bit. The other thing that happens a lot now is I have friends asking me for advice. I will get calls from people I barely know. I've been talking to an elder gentleman who knows me from the pottery studio for the last couple of months as he's working through an arrhythmia problem as well. And what's concerning is that he doesn't understand what he's being told, and he's calling me instead. The good news is that I've, being who I am, have done a ton of reading, and I can be like, okay, I know what that word is, Bill. We can work through that. Like, we can do this. However, I think about the people who would ask their friends, I don't know, should I do an ablation? Should I really do that? Or should I just stick to the medicine or whatever? And they're asking people who don't have the same level of like research and, from my SSW background, I know how to actually read research too, right? So anyway, just something to think about is it's good to go to friends for support, but I think that there's opportunities there where people are going to people that they feel safe with instead of people who would know the right information for them. And I think in the Canadian system, for example, that can be really tricky because there's so many waits to just see someone. And then in the American system, I'm guessing fees would also be a factor. So to now, one of my arrhythmias continues to plague me, as I mentioned. I have a lot more energy now. I am so happy I had my ablations. I'm off the blood thinners, which is also great because that was not a fun time. I have moved into full-time life as a professional artist and art instructor. So after my first surgery, I turned to my husband and I said, I've been wanting to make this change for years. And a heart event is commonly a catalyst for change. And I said, it's time. And he said, yeah, I agree. Since my first ablation, I've had 2 solo exhibitions. I'm currently living in Haliburton, Ontario, which is in the middle of nowhere in the Highlands, taking my ceramics intensive at the School of Art up here. There's Fleming College up here. And last year I spent as the artist in residence for the city of Ottawa, and I have an exhibition coming up for that in February this year. So I feel like I'm not only back to myself, but to where I really want to be. And that's pretty exciting. In 2024, I won Best Sculpture at the Ottawa Guild of Potters juried exhibition. And in 2025, this guy won People's Choice. And I also show him because he's the first in a series I'm doing where I'm reflecting on my heart journey. And so if you look at him carefully, he's got roses in his chest. And the idea of being suddenly very aware of the somatic experiences, the sensations I have in my chest for the last, well, for quite a few years now. Has made me really aware of this area. And so I wanted to capture what it's like to feel joy and peace in that area. Yeah, heart disease has been a big teacher. I learned that I can do things by myself I didn't think I could do. I learned how to do research in a whole new area. I learned how to be persistent and advocate and to be very brave. And also, I've gained a lot of perspective on what's worth my stress and what's not. And I just magically, by the way, all those symptoms my doctor said were anxiety have not returned since I had my ablation.
Thank you so much, Jordan. That like the ups and downs and the ins and outs of learning to live with heart disease, and landing in a really positive space. So yes, I know there's still things going on, but knowing that you're in that strong space and moving forward is really heartwarming. Thank you. So with that, we're going to pass it over to Dr. Sears. Over to you, Dr. Sears.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody can see my slides and following up on Jordan. What a great conversation about and insight about what she's been through. And I think many of the things that she mentioned are part of the things we'll talk about as well. So it's a pleasure to be here. I think my introduction included that I'm a clinical psychologist that's been dedicated to the care of heart patients, specifically the psychology of heart patients for the last 30 years. And what I've learned over the past 30 years is very clear that there's no such thing as cardiology without psychology, that you can't practice cardiology without understanding where patients are coming from. I like to get into cardiology clinics and rebel rouse about this. I say, hey, if it affects the heart, it affects the mind. There is no way through the experience of heart disease without how it affects each of us. My comments today have been focused more on heart failure, but many of these ideas go across all of the different manifestations of heart problems. Obviously, Jordan talked about AFib, but many of my comments today will be about heart failure. And the idea here is that it is terrible. Who'd want heart failure? But the process of heart failure, the process of heart problems also can create what I'll call special knowledge, much of what Jordan talked about. This whole idea that she found some new parts of her, the fox that was there with his in the sculpture of the fox, I think showed a little bit of special knowledge that Fox had some insights that maybe wouldn't have been gotten except for the challenges that heart disease presented. So today I want to talk about heart failure patients experiencing distress and disengagement as a first idea. Secondly, there are common processes that all heart patients face that have to do with the psychology of living with heart disease. And finally, some comments about coping. And then we'll finish up and have some Q&A. So I want to give some of the background about why is heart failure so difficult? Why are heart problems challenging in so many ways? First, when you look at the quality of life of heart patients versus cancer patients, you can see that in this large study published a year or two ago in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, that patients with heart failure actually had worse quality of life substantially, 2 standard deviations, which means a big set of steps down in terms of day-to-day function of living with a heart problem, and in this case, heart failure. Mental health was equivalent to to cancer patients. However, if you go to any cancer center and you say, I'd like to see a psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker right away, somebody in that cancer institute would come out and say, hey, what can I do to help? If you do that in any heart institute, except maybe in Ottawa and a few places in the US, there's nobody coming. There aren't psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers that are dedicated to helping heart patients at the same rates. And this matters because when you look at the rates of depression and anxiety in particular, really about 1/3 of our patients are dealing with substantial mood disorders and substantial anxiety or stress-related complaints. This is a large meta-analysis. So what I'm trying to do is provide some of the scientific numbers behind why does psychology matter for the care of heart patients. We also know that when you look at heart failure in particular, there are specific fears that heart failure patients face. Anxiety, again, prominent in 1 out of 3 patients. But look at some of these fears. When you zero in on some of the fears that go with heart failure, this is an Australian study that looked at a large sample of heart failure patients. And you can see a couple of key things. One of the biggest fears heart failure patients reported was not knowing how my family will cope if something happened to me, with as many as 60%, almost 60% of patients saying, well, what's going to happen to my family if something were to happen to me? Then you see this ideas about being a burden. You see these worries about a future heart event, all in the 30s and 40% range. And then I think the day-to-day life is affected by being aware of your heartbeat and, most significantly, avoiding activities that make my heart beat faster. Avoiding follow-up. Jordan mentioned even avoiding follow-up, just avoiding situations and activities that remind you of your heart. So when we go and we think about this, there are other things that go with all of this. So this is a sort of complicated idea here about all the ways in which anxiety and depression have inflammatory and biologic implications. And then down here you have insomnia and cognitive impairment, which is common in meaning a large group of patients, particularly, for example, with AFib, have a lot of sleep apnea. And as you look at heart failure, when the heart's not pushing a lot of blood, changes in cognition and memory and thinking can happen, particularly attention and concentration. So there's a psychological burden. What about a behavioral burden? Yeah, well, one of the things that I notice most in clinic, and one of the things that I focus the most on in my clinical practice, is what I'll call disengagement. That the most common reaction to a heart problem is just to pull back, to withdraw. And that same process occurs in anxiety, that both heart patients and anxiety patients can withdraw and say, it's just safer for me if I don't really go out and do stuff. It's much safer for me if I could just stay home, both of which are false. Both heart disease and anxiety get better by re-engaging, not disengaging. Yet it's completely against the grain. The first thing you want to do is just say, am I okay here? Where can I feel safe again? Because heart disease has a way of undermining your perceptions of safety. And it can make you feel quite disabled as well. That the idea that, oh, I'm having trouble being able to do anything also happens. Now, I mentioned earlier this idea about disengagement. One of the reasons is because, and one of the responses is that you can get the thoughts about heart disease can become quite intrusive. You can just not get away from the thoughts and feelings about, am I okay? Is this the right thing to do? Will I make my condition worse? What if something happens to me? Boy, Jordan mentioned dealing with coyotes. That's terrifying, right? I can't go out there. Something bad might happen to me. And it's a completely reasonable set of fears. This is not the psychology of being neurotic. This is the psychology of being realistic at times. So, this idea of disabling, right? All the symptoms that go with heart failure in particular, I'm talking about right now, but even the palpitations and the symptoms that Jordan talked about in terms of AFib, we have a continuum of different kinds of disease here within heart disease. And the symptoms can be quite alarming. When you look at the burdens of living with heart failure, there's a lot of change necessary. All of a sudden, people say, well, I want to pay attention to what you're eating all the time, and I want to pay attention to what you do all day, and now I want to know what you can and can't do. And there's medical expenses in the U.S. at least, and there's some in Canada as well. Taking medications was actually the least burdensome of the activities in this study, recently published, and that these burdens were associated with worse outcomes. So this is not easy, right? I mean, you need help along the way. And one of the things that you got to salute Anne and others who have supported this webinar to get started on a regular basis is that they recognize that this kind of support's needed. both talking about the burdens of heart disease, talking about the psychological burdens, talking about the physical burdens, being able to understand where other people's journeys have taken them, recognizing the hopefulness in the process. As Jordan talked about how things ended up. By the way, that's those sculptures are amazing, right? I love the octopus one, and the fox, of course, wins the day, which everybody already agreed because it won. But this whole idea of no one fights alone, that understanding heart disease is a team sport. This is just a quick study that recently came out with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, just highlighted, this range of steps that, what do heart failure patients do all day, averaging somewhere between about 52 and 6,500 steps. So somewhere in around the 5,800 steps range, which actually is not too bad. Again, these were Dutch patients who actually had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. But it gives you some sense about what are people doing with this. Now, one of the challenges for us at East Carolina, you can see this is where I work, and you can see this massive medical facility, but just beyond that is nothing but rurality, right? It's a little bit more like Canada out here, where we have large spaces of rurality, and people come to the medical center from far away. But the reason that I mention this, of course, is this idea of to empower our patients. That's really our vision here, is to increase the confidence of our patients and the activity of our patients. So the two things I've talked about, confidence and activeness. And I think the idea here is to try to create safety in the context of threat. This classic picture shows that these guys had become somewhat accustomed to the day-to-day activities in the context of threat. And we do that with heart disease. That working with heart disease means that, yeah, I mean, I could have symptoms today and I need to take these medicines, and I do have a medical team. And while this might look quite reckless in today's construction environment, and it would be, the point, though, was that they found safety amongst each other and safety in their day-to-day work by understanding what was going on. What are the challenges and how do we manage them? So I'll start out with this principle about heart failure patients, and all heart patients experience distress and disengagement. Why? Let's look at a couple of common processes. So the model that we work from in clinic and in our research is that heart events trigger changes in these big three. The big three is, first, it changes your degree of symptom awareness, body awareness, that when you've had a heart event, you suddenly body listen at a higher rate. You listen to your body at a much higher rate, which means that you hear a lot more, both benign and concerning. Second, heart events trigger a degree of avoidance behavior, a tendency to say, well, I'm not interested in going. I want to stay home. I think it's safe here. And just disengagement and avoidance is a common reaction. And then finally, catastrophic thinking is, am I in trouble here? I'm in trouble all the time. Until somebody tells me I'm okay, I'm in trouble all the time. And one more heart event will just drive me crazy. And that catastrophic kind of approach just stirs you up. These three elements just stir you up, producing a degree of fear and reducing quality of life. So we're constantly paying attention to these three elements. Said differently, hypervigilance is like this kind of tracking of excessively of all of these blood pressures, and this hypervigilance. Oh, I'm gonna find a pattern in my blood pressure. I'm gonna find a pattern using my rhythms. Now, that's different if we don't know the pattern, but most of the time we will know the pattern. And this is, of course, when I'm talking about it being excessive. Avoidance, sitting on the sidelines even when you could participate, that's a common problem with avoidance. And finally, as I mentioned, catastrophizing, able to jump to the worst case scenario in a single bound. Both men and women can do that. I just happen to have anxiety girl here. So this idea, the big three are the common reactions to a heart event, and that's what we pay a lot of attention to. Okay, so with that, I want to now turn toward what are some things that we can do about managing distress? What are some takeaways? I'm going to suggest 4 quick areas today during my time with you that I think should be things to consider as you go forward. I'm going to talk about self-reflection, reconnection, taking actions, and just giving thanks. Of course, coping is a much more profound set of activities, but this is a beginning sort of introduction to some key areas. I think one of the first things about the psychology of heart disease is, well, how are you doing? How are you holding up under what is universally seen as stressful? I mean, if only we had this kind of gauge on people, we would know how you were doing, but that's not how it works. It's more like a check engine light in our cars, where I don't know what's wrong with my car. It just says check engine. I don't know even know what that means, except, well, yeah, I still got an engine as far as I know. And so, but it turns out, different brands produce, oh, well, here's your check engine lights, and you can go through the brakes and the airbags and the engine and oil pressure. Yes, could we do the same with ourselves? I mean, are we taking showers? Are we eating nutritious food? Have we moved around? Have we journaled? Have we, not all these things are needed. But there is a set of behaviors associated with feeling good. I've heard speakers say, well, you got to make the bed every day. Well, I'm not so sure about that, but I am sure about accomplishing things does in fact make you feel better. And that while you feel kind of blasé or not interested in doing something, sometimes doing something, regardless of how you feel, can really help. So my first strategy here is kind of check your mind and check your engine. Make sure you're doing okay. And I think do that with a degree of self-compassion. If you said, "Oh, I'm not doing good. I'm just not as tough as I wanted to be." Wait a second. I mean, is that really true? And if you had said that to a friend, would they say, "You're right. Boy, you're a loser." I mean, nobody would do that, but compassion, that we have for other people can actually be important to keep for ourselves as well. All right, well, what about reconnection, right? I think we're in this as a family and as in teams and medical teams. And so, who are your lifelines? Who are the people you would call on if you needed help? Lifelines on the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You got to have 5 of them. Research in cardiology suggests you got to have 3 of them. And, I think identifying people that matter in your world. I like the Beatles, right? The Beatles are big time band. Paul McCartney's still out there doing it at 81 years old, still singing. It was in Atlanta Sunday night. Paul McCartney, I was with all these talented people. John Lennon had all of these instruments he played. Paul McCartney played all these instruments. George Harrison. These 3 guys are amazing. But this guy just played the drums and tambourine. I don't know how much skill that takes, and some maracas. You say, boy, these 3 are really the guys that are doing it. But Paul McCartney knew better. Paul McCartney said, no. Yeah, I know we got a bunch of talented guys that write all the songs and play all these instruments, but hey, Ringo, you're the greatest drummer in the world. Really. From Paul McCartney. So recognizing everybody on your team has a role to play, even if it's a small role, even if it's maybe not as important as everybody else's role, it is a role. And maybe it is as important. And I think Paul knew that and said, boy, you're the greatest drummer in the world. It's pretty impressive. So self-reflection and reconnection are really the 2 starting points. What about take actions, right? So, there's a tendency with psychologists to say, well, let's think about how we're doing. But I'm going to suggest to you that doing beats thinking, that in particular, helping our loved ones or ourselves, if you're the patient, to do things beats thinking. But you got to know what you love to do, right? Do what? What do you want me to do, Sears? I mean, what do you want? I'm going to suggest that quality of life is defined by the activities that you do, that your day-to-day quality of life is, well, I don't know, did you do anything worth having? Activities of fun, for example. This is my university here. We got 100,000 people that live here, and 50,000 of them are sitting in this stadium right here, rooting on the Pirates of East Carolina. I mean, that's fun for me, right? I love live sports. It's my favorite thing. I don't even like hockey, but I love going to NHL games, man, because on TV it's not the same. I love being at the live venue. What about activities that bring your family together? The old family reunions or even just short getaways in which you and your family can get closer together, sometimes by physical space. I always loved when when I had young kids, we would go and stay in a hotel room because then we were all in one place. You couldn't couldn't hide. Everybody had to interact. I always kind of liked hotel rooms for that reason. And activities of awe, right? I mean, you guys live in one of the most beautiful countries in the world, probably my favorite country to visit. And you have so many points of awe from Stanley Park to Banff to across all the way across to Halifax. You just have beautiful places. And being in awe of nature, being in awe of moments in which you're touched by the things around you, that continues to be an important part of quality of life. And research keeps supporting this concept of awe, and it's quite interesting. I kind of like a chaser of awe now. I chase it. I try to find awe everywhere I look. Or activities of peace, finding ways in which you can be at peace, activities in which you're going to cool your jets and find peace, calmness. Of course, cell phones kind of steal that away from us. So sometimes we got to find a way toward peace. This is sort of a silly idea, but these are some of the activities that would define some quality of life. Do something relaxing, eat green fruit or vegetables, drink some water, I don't know, minutes of activity. They're silly, but the point is to be mindful and deliberate about the activities that you are engaged in. Finally, we'll just talk about giving thanks, about what are you grateful for today. A lot of times people get up and say, well, be grateful. And it seems kind of inauthentic to me. It feels like, well, be thankful for what? Get off the stage. But the point is that gratefulness, being biased, actually looking for things you're grateful for. We are what we see. So when I say to you, look around the room and look at something that you're grateful for right now. I got a picture of my sons over here. I got I got my computer over here, and I got a roof over my head. I mean, I'm so grateful for some things. But it can be a little bit silly, but it's not, because it's like taking everything you have and recognizing I'm looking for things I'm grateful for can really flip the script. Research suggests that's exactly how it works. When we look at large-scale meta-analyses about gratitude, does it even work? It does seem to be associated with both physical and mental health benefits. And you can see some things, and you can go online, like, what are some journal prompts? What was the best thing that happened today? Who makes you feel loved and why? Name someone that helps you. Name someone that's nice to you. Who's your best friend and why? These seem Pollyannish, but we live in a time in which the negative clickbaits, the world affairs can pretty much upset us without any trouble. And so reminding ourselves that all is not ill, some is well, even though much needs to be changed in our world this moment. There are things that we can be grateful for as well. And it reminds me of old Mr. Rogers, who said, when I was a boy, I would see scary things in the news. Boy, you should watch the news now. My mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You always find people who are helping. And I think while that may seem sort of naive or Pollyannish, I think the point is that we need a balanced perspective, and being grateful brings the balance back against our own neurotic or anxiety feelings. And when we think about the future, mental health is such an important element, and what we believe about the future is so important. Looking for ways in which we can cheer on small victories, set goals about the future, and expect the future to be more desirable than we can even imagine, recognizing that even when things go wrong, we will find silver linings. It's elementary to everything that we experience as human beings, trying to find ways in which, despite not wanting to have had something happen to us, how do we make the best of it? It's fundamental to psychological health. And so, in my view, I think you still got it. That despite heart disease at times attacking your confidence level, attacking your feelings of security or safety, attacking your beliefs about the future, the truth is that you still got it. That despite the challenges of heart disease, you still got it. You still have the mojo, the grit, and the very ideas that got you to this point in your life, they're still part of you. Heart disease can't actually take that from you. So with my final points here is this: heart disease has a distress and disengagement component that we've got to push against. That the common processes of hypervigilance, catastrophizing, and avoidance behavior are common, and we need to watch for those. And then finally, coping matters means what are the things we do on a daily basis to minimize those effects so that we bring our heart and soul all the way back. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I think landing on those 4 areas where we can take action and we can focus our energy is a really just having as heart patients those kind of in the back of our minds is really helpful in terms of kind of reframing the story, kind of moving it out of the dark place and into a place with a bit more light. We're so
Thank you.
fortunate, as you said, Dr. Sears, in terms of not only having great places close to us where there's natural wonders, but we're also really fortunate in terms of other spaces that we can find awe, like whether it's the art galleries or the sculpture or those kinds of places in our environments where sometimes we forget that these places are so accessible and there's so much awe to be found in those places as well.
Thank
So
you. Yeah, that's exactly right. And boy, I see awe in that fox. I want to meet that fox of yours. I think that fox has got quite an expression. Got a little wisdom, little special knowledge mixed in there. So hats off to you. I also love octopus because there's a condition called takotsubo in which it's an octopus pot. It's a Japanese condition that was defined by them, and so I have a lot of, I don't think they're called octopi, but I have many examples of octopus in my office because of that. So I know you must like them because I saw at least 2 statues with octopus.
yeah. All right. So we're gonna move into some. We have a little bit of time for questions. So there's one question around the connection between a heart condition and physiology. So Jennifer is saying, I would argue based on my medical knowledge that the reduced brain perfusion can cause brain inflammation and affect neurotransmitters. So really looking closely at that relationship between the heart and the brain.
Mhm. Yeah, so we do have some evidence of that. We struggle with exactly how to pin that down. There are multiple mechanisms. They're both hemodynamic as well as neurologic. You suggested changes in neurotransmitters. We do have some evidence that we do have some evidence of platelet aggregation differences. The problem is, okay, so let's say that we have that perfectly understood. Right now, we don't have any agents for it. All we can do is tune up your heart as strong as we can and hope for the downstream benefit. So as of right now, we don't have good agents for that. I mean, of course we have psychiatric medicines that can affect a few of the neurotransmitters, but I would suggest that that we only see part of all of the neurotransmitters right now. We're still learning. Like I guess we're going to have the decade of the brain. Well, we need a century of the brain to really understand where we are. I think we'll be just laughing at ourselves in 10 or 15 years that we have hints of the answers, but not real answers.
Okay, thank you. Often when I hear folks talk about their heart journeys, people talk about symptoms that look a lot like PTSD. Can you talk a little bit about PTSD and heart events and the relationship there and
Sure. Jordan, do you want to hit on that or you want me to take that?
I mean, yeah, go ahead, and I can always add a note or two after.
Okay, cool. Well, so PTSD we think occurs in about 12% of patients with heart disease. Now that's across all the conditions. What is PTSD? PTSD is hyper anxiety, hyper arousability. Number 1. Number 2, avoidance of stimuli associated with the trauma. So I don't want to talk about, like, even one of the things Jordan said was like, I don't go to that doctor anymore, right? It's just an avoidance. And so the avoidance comes in with all kinds of like it can come in by nightmares, it can come in through intrusive thoughts. And I showed that data that showed 48% of heart patients have intrusive thoughts. So the symptoms of PTSD are frequent. The true raw disorder with all the diagnostic criteria met, only 12%. So we have hyperarousability, we have avoidance of content. And then, of course, we have the occurrence of a life-threatening event or out of the common human experience. I think most physicians use PTSD as shorthand for a psychological reaction. I don't really love that because post-traumatic stress is a very specific thing that we see. The symptoms can be quite severe. The vast majority of our heart patients do not get the very severe effects of PTSD. We do tend to see that in people who have been victims of crime or war. That doesn't make it any better or worse. It just means that the presentation is different. So I'm careful about PTSD. It's a much more finite set of conditions. I do like the term post-traumatic stress symptoms. I think that describes things much better than running around saying, I have PTSD. Well, that's a formal diagnosis.
Okay.
I could add to, from an SSW background, we would talk about PTSD in relation to a situation where a person feels helpless as being like a key component to developing a sort of post-traumatic reaction. And that certainly would apply to most heart events. We usually feel pretty helpless. Like we don't really know, we don't have a lot of control. That someone else might be doing something for us, but we don't have a lot of control of it. So that like I can see why it's easily connected, the two together. I just texted Emery that I was sorry because I was worried I was choking up on camera, because even as I tell my story now, and it's been years, I still feel that lump in my throat begin, and I feel completely normal. I can tell people all day that I have heart problems, and then when I'm walking through the story and I'm mentally reviewing it, it triggers still emotions for me. And also sensory stimulation is like a key part too. So like there'll be a part where perhaps like every time you hear the beeping of I don't know what the machine's called beside your bed, but the machine that beeps endlessly, like maybe when you hear that. Sorry?
Telemetry.
Oh, the telemetry. I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it. To this day, I hate it. Or like maybe the smell of hospital smell or whatever, right? Like that could be really triggering. Also, Dr. Sears, I don't know if you want to but there's a difference too. Like they started to get more nuanced. It used to be just PTSD, and then there's acute traumatic stress disorder, and then there's chronic as well. So like I guess my point there is just to know that you could be acutely going through something. So recently my own father just had 2 back-to-back heart attacks in the last 2 months. It was kind of crazy, and he's doing well, but when he talks about it, he starts to cry because of the shock of it all. And I think partly too, the medical system, like if you have a heart attack, from what I've experienced, you go in and the doctors are all very calm and everything's very orderly, but you're going through something that just is completely incongruent with that calm, orderly world. And then they visit you at your bed and they're calm and everything's fine the whole time, and then you leave and it's like there was never a point where anyone just sat beside you while you cried or like hyperventilated a little bit. So I think sometimes I'm not saying people are or aren't diagnosed properly, but just that there's pent up feelings that we just don't get to express through the medical journey.
Well, there's no doubt, and that's one of the reasons I come out blaring with there's no such thing as cardiology without psychology. So if you're practicing cardiology without psychology, you're not practicing cardiology. You're practicing the technical aspects, but the care of humans involves validating emotional experience. To me, that's what the simple answer or the simple missing element here for you, as you described it, was somebody simply saying, "I know this is hard to believe." There's some inability to fully understand it. There's a little degree of shock, and yet the emotions are there, and acknowledging, hey, you're going to have a few down days. You might even feel like you're going crazy for a couple of days. because it feels so out of body, so shocking that this has happened. I mean, you're a young female. What are you doing over here with AFib? You don't fit the profile. So there is there's an invalidation that can happen in the technical aspects of care, and that is something that we talk a lot about in our writing about. Great care means emotional validation and support.
Thank you. Thank you for that. There's a few questions questions that folks have that touch a little bit on what do you do if your healthcare team isn't supporting you when it comes to mental health concerns? Why is it overlooked? Why is mental health so overlooked in heart disease? And Dr. Sears, do you go out to other institutions to talk about some of these things to try to raise awareness some?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to let Jordan answer the first part. What did she do when she felt left out? So this is my life's work. This is why I'm on the call today, is that I think we've got to spread the word much more. We are seeing progress there. The European Society of Cardiology this month came out with a consensus statement that mental health care should be a part of cardiovascular care as a routine practice. We don't have such a Canadian statement. We have a mild one from the American College of Cardiology. The Canadian cardiology groups are really quite active in at least talking about these things. I don't know how much about executing. But we think this is it needs to be there, as I said. I mentioned that during the talk. And there's good evidence for it. It's not just a nice thing. It's a must thing. People who don't have psychological care and need psychological care cost more to take care of, have worse outcomes, and it's miserable. Why would you do that? Why would you purposely leave out an element? All because of stigma? Come on, man. Let's get over the stigma, okay? That's sort of silly. I mean, we can go for sexual health, but you can't go for mental health? Come on, man. This is crazy. We got to make mental health cool. I've been trying to do is like, hey, you don't want your patients to have stronger mental health? What's wrong with you? You want to be weaker mentally? What's wrong with you? Nobody wants to do that. Come on. So I keep trying to shake them up. They don't like cardiologists aren't used to somebody, facing up to them. They're used to, being apex predators.
All right, Jordan, what about like from a patient perspective, when your concerns haven't been taken seriously or you don't feel you're getting the support you need?
Okay. Without knowing who's in the room, and I apologize to any doctors in the room, I've learned that some doctors are sexist or have some other issue, and they don't even realize they're necessarily doing it. Some of the responses I've gotten, like, for example, you should just let your husband work and you just stay home. Like, they would not have said that to my husband in exchange, and I was making good money. Like, there's just no way they would have said, well, she's making lots of money, you just stay home. So that stuff happens. So like recognizing that you are potentially up against some biases to do with your age, race, religion, whatever it is. And just knowing that that's part of reality. So first off, number two, I know this is really old school, but many years ago, my dad made me read a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And the important part in there is never make anyone feel like they're wrong. So I try and talk to my doctors in a way that doesn't make them feel like they're wrong. And that takes a lot of practice, and I still screw up all the time. But that has helped me with some of the really big egos. And then thirdly, for those of you who have any concept of video games, this is my most recent discovery, and it's been huge for me. When you're playing a video game, there's these things called non-playable characters. They'll be like the barkeep or like the guy at the potion place or whatever, and you walk up to them and you can ask them a question or you can ask them for a product, and that's all you're allowed to do. And they just repeat the same, howdy, how did you get here, stranger? And then that's all you can do, okay? So that's a non-playable character. So when I come up to a healthcare professional that refuses to participate in my recovery, I just remind myself, this is a non-playable character. They've obviously said the 3 things they're allowed to say in this video game, and I need to move on to a different character.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's a great
It's been a big help.
All right. Well, I think we're out of time now, or I don't think I know we're out of time. So thank you both so much again for taking the time to be with us today. Lots of thank yous and really great presentation comments in the comments and Q&A. Really appreciate having you here today. Mark, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
No, thank you, Dr. Sears. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Amazing webinar. This will be posted on YouTube. We'll share it in our newsletter. We'll get it out to all the registrants because I know people are going to want to watch it again. Exceptional. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan, so much. Thank you, Dr. Sears.